All right. So, first, if you can just say and spell first and last name for me, and then give me the title and how you'd kind of like me to refer to you in my reporting.
Okay. My name is Susan Lipkins, SusanLipkins. I am a psychologist and an expert in hazing. I am also the author of Preventing Hazing: How Parents, Teachers, and Coaches Can Stop the Violence, Harassment, and Humiliation.
First, let's talk about, let's just simply define, how do you define for people when they ask what constitutes an incident of hazing?
The definition of hazing changes according to the various institutions. So often the school district will have one definition and policy. The state might have a different one. There is no national one. I believe that hazing is a process used by groups to maintain a hierarchy or to discipline. It is based on traditions and rituals in that group, and they talk about regardless of consent. Um, this is everyone is responsible. So the perpetrators are responsible, but the victim is not responsible. So the issue of regardless of consent is because those who are victimized do not have a choice. Once there is a hazing that occurs, there is no choice. You are stuck.
And talk to me about, obviously, we think about, maybe seeing in national headlines or something about, college campuses, whether it's fraternities, sororities, prestigious sports, dynasties, whatever kind of team we think of. But it happens in, primary school age too.
Actually, hazing often starts in high school. There are times when it's starting in middle school, like eighth graders who are often pulled up into the high school teams. But I think the NCAA reported that about 79% of their athletes going into college have already been hazed. So I started my research in 2003 when there was a horrible hazing on a football team in a high school close to where I work. Um, and that involved sexual assault, sodomy, and it was pretty horrible. And then I found out that it's been going on, it's been alive and well, and has increased in the last 20 years across high schools throughout the United States for male and female teams.
Tell me about, I guess, what you notice about, is there any kind of trend or statistics that you've kind of pulled out from all of this time doing your research? Is it, you know, more males, less females, less males, less, more males? I mean, is it a specific sport?
So,
Is it
so let me begin with statistics. Statistics in hazing are almost impossible to get because one is there's no agency that's funding any kind of research. There's no one place to report a hazing. There is no standardized definition. And mostly because those who haze and those who are hazed will never report it because there is a code of silence. And the code of silence basically states that you will, what goes on in the locker room stays in the locker room. So that's true for hazing and a lot of other things. Also, I have what I call the blueprint of hazing, which means you come in, you want to be part of a group or a team that has a tradition of hazing, and you are hazed. You are the victim. The next year, you are the bystander watching as the newbies get hazed. And eventually, it's your senior, and now you have the status and the power, and you feel like you have the right and duty to do unto others what was done to you. So you repeat the tradition. So this is how hazing continues, decades over decades. I believe that each time that a hazing is repeated, the perpetrator wants to add their own mark. So it may increase. So instead of 5 paddles, it's 6, then 10, then 20. Instead of 1 shot of alcohol, it becomes 20 shots. And so the hazing is based on a tradition, but it becomes distorted and gets larger and larger and more risky.
And what we do know out of the limited information we got from the superintendent so far is that this happened, after hours, off of school property, but he did say it involves members of the men's varsity lacrosse team and other West Hill district students. Um, what is so important about what the next steps are from the school district now?
It is dicey for them because there's been a report, and according to what information they have, that report may go further up the state, and it may be an important kind of thing. It may not, it may end. My experience is that most school districts and most local police departments really do not know how to investigate a hazing because it is so sensitive and because of the code of silence. So even if victims have been hurt and harmed or ended up in the emergency room, they rarely want to report what actually has happened to them because they fear retribution by the group, not only by the team, not only by the perpetrators, but by the entire community. So I have a phrase I call the second hazing. And what that means is that about 85% of a community, such as the one we're talking about, will support the team and the coach and act as if nothing terrible happened. And whoever reported it was a wuss and that they shouldn't have done it. And then, they didn't have the spirit that they should have towards the team. 15%, including the parents, or at least the mothers of the victims, typically say, oh my God, we have to stop this. We don't want other children to be hurt. This is terrible. This is risky. This should have stopped a long time ago. And they usually are driven underground. Sometimes kids have to move school districts, and they could be isolated and ostracized, and it's difficult. So to be a brave person who is like breaking the code of silence and saying this is bad and this shouldn't happen, and just in order to be on the team, I should not have had to go through these experiences, is, how these things will change, but it takes a brave person and a brave family to come forward.
You keep mentioning the code of silence. Is that something that is, industry term is not the right, phrase here, but is that something that you've kind of developed through your research, or is that something that kind of those who are in this space doing the same research refer to it as too?
Code of silence, in quotes, is a term that has been used for many decades. You might hear it in terms of the police department, the blue code of silence, meaning the police who don't talk about what's happening. And it's in military situations and clearly in hazing situations. So the code of silence develops in a group where that membership feels like, they have your back. But if you break the code of silence and tell the outside world what goes on inside, you are basically asking for retribution. So I think in terms of laws, we might refer to the whistleblower law, which is supposed to protect those who blow a whistle on, let's say, insider trading or something that happens in a business that's not accurate or appropriate. But even those people are not always well protected. So when you have a hazing, it becomes difficult to protect the victim and those supporters.
What do you see typically happen, I guess, especially in these situations where it's not college students, they are not, adults in the eyes of the criminal justice system, if you have, kids under 18, in a high school setting, that makes things a little more difficult. We don't really find out about things that happen with minors. But I mean, what can you tell me about that kind of,
Well,
I
from a
guess?
legal point of view, there are two things. There's the actual criminal charges that could take place. And I think in New York, it might be 16 and not 18. And the judge usually has the ability to put somebody in a juvenile detention or an adult detention, and that is often an issue. It really depends on the severity of the hazing. So when there's sexual assault, when people have been hurt, they had to go to the hospital, or there's some kind of significant subsequent physical or psychological damage, that is where criminal charges are more likely to occur. I would say often it's just considered a misdemeanor. The worst that might happen is that the students have to do community service. And then there's the civil lawsuit that can follow after a criminal, in which the families of the students who have been hurt have the ability and right to sue the school district for negligence, and or the actual families of the perpetrators.
Anything you can tell me just about because we're hearing about this one incident, you know, I'm sure, you can tell me what you think of that, but I mean, you probably think, well, how this can't just be something that popped out of thin air. You wonder if there is a pattern there.
No, I'm sure there's a pattern there. So hazing, as I said, is based on the blueprint of hazing that I mentioned before, and it goes on year after year after year. The students usually plan the hazing way in advance. This is not an impulsive kind of thing. They know to do it at places that there is no supervision or it's under supervised. Typically in a team, it will happen maybe at a team party at somebody's house. It will happen on a field. It will happen in the locker room. It will happen on a bus. It will happen on a hotel. These are places that are typically under supervised, and the students know quite well that nobody's watching, and they expect not to get in trouble. And the truth is, probably thousands of hazings go on every day, and they're never reported. So every once in a while, one will be reported, and that's usually because it's broken through a threshold such that the victim can't take it, either because of the degree of embarrassment, humiliation, pain, suffering, psychologically or physically.
I mean, I guess, is there anything connected with suicide rates in these young people who get hazed, or just what do you see typically happen as the outcome? Is there like a bubbling over point where something really,
Okay,
do these kids
so
end up
there,
getting suspended if there's no criminal charges? Is it just goes on?
okay, so in terms of hazing, I would say yes, the beat goes on. And what that means is, even if the perpetrators have a severe event happen to them, mostly the rest of the students don't learn from that, because at this age, uh, kids this age, adolescents, and even in college, they feel like what's going to happen, it's not going to happen to them. They have a protective coating. Somehow somebody else is getting in the car accident, somebody else is getting the speeding ticket, and somebody else is getting hazed, and it's not them. So even though we would like people to learn through examples, I don't think it works very well in this age group or around hazing. Um, Typically, uh, here's what may happen. The police and the school district may find in their investigation that there's not much evidence, and they drop it completely. They will probably strengthen their hazing education to the students, and I would recommend also to the coaches, assistant coaches, and everybody else in the school who might be able to notice that hazing is going on. Most importantly is having a reporting system that is like 24/7, and that they can report hazing and other incidences to the school district. Likely they will be possibly suspended. As I said, it may be even lighter than that. It kind of depends on the culture of the actual town and of the school. Some of the administrators are much tougher, and some are like, more easygoing. It's happened to me, it'll happen to them. This is what we do. Um, so it's
It's
really hard to
definitely,
predict.
not to interrupt you, it's definitely one of our smaller districts in total. So it's a very small, it's a small town wrapped in, the bubble of Syracuse, suburban small town. So,
Right, and a lot of times, as I said, the town will support the coach and the team, because they identify with the team and they want the team to be successful. They think it makes them feel good that they have a good team, and they don't want them to stop playing, or to anything negative to happen.
anything else? This is so interesting. So thank you. I could ask you a billion more questions, but anything, just at this juncture where we're at right now, what do you say to, I guess, parents of these students or others who have, fallen victim that we know about or we might never know about, and to the parents and the mentors, the guardians of those who are allegedly involved here? I mean, what happens, in your mind now? I mean, what do you want them to hear?
That's a good question. Okay, so probably everybody could benefit. And when I say everybody, I mean perpetrators, victims, bystanders, and the parents of those students would benefit by having a therapist because they will help navigate through what's going to happen, some of which may be in the eye of the news and some of which may not. Secondly, and probably they will also all contact a lawyer, an attorney, who will determine whether there is or is not a worthwhile case or a legal argument to be made. Mostly it's the school that's going to be held responsible for not knowing about the hazing and not doing enough to prevent it from happening, because they are the overarching responsible authorities. And there's always a question as to whether the coach really did know and looked the other way, and it was a wink, wink, whether the athletic trainer knew, whether the assistants knew, and whether they should have or could have known. That becomes the main issue. So the focus ends up being off of the perpetrator students and onto the school district. For those who are victimized, there's probably many, many, many victims out there, most of whom will not come forward because they don't want to deal with the humiliation or with the ostracization that may occur, and them being isolated. And they might realize that, the parents might realize that there could be a lawsuit and that could be worth a lot of money. So it depends on what's most important to the student and the family, and what amount of emotional suffering they want to deal with, because a hazing trial is not easy.
Anything else you want to add? I mean, but you kind of said what I said at the beginning, that hazing happens and it's not just in college at those at a fraternity that you think of maybe, but it happens in middle and high school too.
Right. I think that I'll add a few pieces and then you can use them or not. How's that? Okay. Hazing occurs in groups that have a hierarchy and they want to maintain that hierarchy. So we know that 24% of students in church groups have been hazed. It's not only teams, although it's frequently athletic teams across the United States, and frequently they're having sexualized hazing. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is that in this case, even if it never gets discovered. The second thing is that it's integrated into the culture of the United States, so it's accepted, which is part of why it's so difficult to change. It's almost impossible to change a culture from the outside. So people have been working to make students aware of hazing, and I think that most of them can give you the definition. And after they give you the definition, the research has shown they will say, but they've never been hazed and they've never hazed anybody else. But if you ask them, have you had to drink more alcohol than you normally would? Yes. Were you ever kidnapped? Yes. Were you ever sexually abused in a way, in a group? Yes. Were you hazed? No. So there's a disconnect between what they know as a definition of hazing, what they can learn and tell you, versus their own identification. And I'm not sure if that's because it's an adult asking that question and they know better than to say, yes, I've been hazed or I've hazed others, or if it's a real disconnect and they don't identify themselves, just like alcoholics rarely identify themselves as alcoholics. So there is a similarity there. Let me think if there's anything else. I think that in terms of a news event, it may be hard to get much information because, as you noticed, many of the students are probably underage, and so their identities will be protected. It's also difficult to actually get the information about the hazing because of the code of silence. And as I said, few districts are really trained on how to interview students so that they could get the information. So I'm not sure where this story will actually end up. The last piece I have would be advice to the school district. And the school district is the one that's usually held responsible. And they think they should better educate the students, but that's not what I think. I think the responsibility is in those people who get paid. So it would start from the superintendent and go all the way down. So all the teachers, the cleaning staff, everybody on all the teams, they're the ones who need to be educated, and they need to understand what their responsibility is to their licensing and to their jobs in terms of reporting, how to report, where to report, when to report. So to me, the education has been misplaced on the shoulders of the students and should be on the shoulders of the adults.